Someone let me into Zoom.
Oh, can you let my friend into the Zoom? Sorry, now you're in charge of Zoom. Hey everybody, thank you all so much for joining us here at our event sponsored by the Tallahassee Community Action Committee, Students for Democratic Society, the Freedom of Social Organization. We are so happy to have our speaker here today, Christina Kittle, who is part of the Jacksonville Community Action Committee. We're just completely honored for y'all who are in person and also on live, whether you're on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to learn more about how to prevent, sexual assault, how to fight against chauvinism, and how to fight against rape culture, and to make sure that we facilitate a real culture for inclusivity and safety. Tallahassee Community Action Committee is a grassroots group dedicated to fighting for peace and justice through direct action. So that means that we don't just talk about these issues, that we actually make sure to put those policy solutions into work. And it also means having people like Christina Kittle, who has been teaching about consent for so long, showing us how to take those skills and make sure that our spaces are safer. And so we hope with that you're able to take that to your community, whether you're in Tallahassee or anywhere else in the country or even in the world. With that being said, I want to introduce Christina Kittle.
Hey, thank you TCAC, thank you Regina. Thank you all for having me here. Like Regina was just saying, it is really important that we keep this as a topic that we discuss and we learn about and we dismantle. So, with that being said, I'm just going to jump right into it. So, one of the things when we're talking about sexual violence, confusion. So the first anchor is just going to be, it's like a mantra for me. Remember the facts. Sometimes I'll just say that and then it helps me to remember them. So one of the facts is that fewer than 8% of rape reports are false cases. So fewer than 8%. And that's including all the way up to like the DOJ level, like the FBI level. So that's first off. So you always hear people, usually they'll try to bring that up. It's like, oh, but what about all the false cases? And what about all these poor people who are accused of this? And it's less than 8%. So that's not a very common thing because it turns out thousand of the people perpetuating this stuff actually get behind bars, it's likely that you're probably not going to report your case, or you'll start downplaying your case in your head. You'll be like, oh, I guess it wasn't that bad, or oh, they'll probably never end up in prison or anything. And then that's scary, they don't even, they have the cops knock on their door, file a report. In most cases, I know this is the case in Jacksonville, if you go through with the report, you have to actually get on the phone with the person who you're accusing, and you have to get them on the phone, and an officer will be listening, but you have to act like the officer is not on the line with you, and you have to try to get them to basically confess on the phone. So I've actually walked with this. I'm gonna say I didn't believe it. I was just astounded that was. But then I actually helped somebody directly in Jacksonville who was going through that, and I was just floored that she had to do that. So yeah, that's part of the process. So knowing that, a lot of people will stop the process right there. Because again, if only 5 out of 1,000 are going to go behind bars, Why would you put yourself in that kind of position to get on the phone with your abuser, get them to recount the story again, and then they might not even end up serving any time? They could just be off the hook, and then they'll be extra mad at you. So the last thing, though, about that, as far as remembering the facts, those are some numbers. You might not remember the exact number. The point is just to remember that false cases are very low and people who actually get locked up are very low. But also, manipulators are good at manipulation. It's like what they do. So I know that anybody who's had to deal with any of this kind of stuff has probably heard, oh, that person, they're so charming. Sociopaths are very charming. Like, oh, that person, they would never do that. Or I had a great time with that person. A lot of the times they'll go out of their way to be extra friendly to everyone around you so that when it comes back around time to gaslight you, they can use that as their ammunition. So just remember these facts, and that can be your first anchor. So, consent as an anchor. Remembering, or actually breaking down what consent means, really helped me. This was actually the turning point for me, because before I actually had a breakdown of what consent was, it was in the abuser's court to decide what it was and what it wasn't. And that's a really dangerous and vulnerable position to be in. So Planned Parenthood actually put out definitions of different types of consent, but it was still hard to remember, especially when you're in the moment and you're like being attacked by somebody or they're gaslighting you. So what our organization, Coalition for Consent, did was we broke it down to say if so, so IFSOE. And for the people who are here in person, I'm actually going to hand out some flyers for you. But the whole idea of if so is to stop and ask yourself, is there consent? If so, it's a go. So we are going to just go through what all the different kinds of consent stand for in that acronym. There you go. So starting with I. And then if you want to just pass them along. Thank you. So starting with I, being informed consent. So informed consent is basically if you have a breach of informed consent, that's somebody who maybe you're hitting it off and you go home with them, but they don't tell you that they're married. They don't tell you that they have an STI or an STD. They don't tell you they have kids. They don't tell you, or maybe they say they're wearing a condom and they're not. These are all breaches of informed consent, because if you're not informed of this information, it might change your decision on whether or not you want to go forward with anything. So I know if somebody who was already married was coming on to me and I knew that they were married, I would change my mind about how we go forward, and everybody should have the liberty to do that. So the I in if so is informed consent. The F is for freely given consent. I feel like there's like no study to measure this by, but I feel like this one is probably the most common. So feel free to disagree or not. But freely given consent is consent without manipulation or fear attached to it. So if somebody is in a situation where they feel scared and they say yes, is that really like a yes? No, absolutely not. You know what I mean? But then your abuser could turn around and be like, oh, well, they said yes. Yes, it means yes. You know what I mean? Not all the time does yes mean yes. Sometimes there's other factors that are affecting whether or not you say yes. A boss, somebody in power, somebody that has something over you, and they make a proposition, you know, quid pro quo situation, that's a breach of freely given consent. So that one's really difficult. Gaslighters, abusers love to play off that one, because they will get you to say yes, because they know in court they can use that as their defense. But for you to know, and this isn't to change abusers, by the way, we can't change them. They're going to keep trying all the tricks in the book, but it's for all of you to know, if you're in that situation, you are not crazy, that person is not owed anything, and think about your freely given consent, if that's a factor or not, and trust yourself to know if it's not. So that's the F and if so. The S stands for specific consent. So you might consent to kissing, you might consent to sex, but maybe not to anal, or maybe not to oral, or maybe not to having a three-way. You know, like, you can say yes to one thing, and that doesn't mean yes to everything, and you have the right to stop, which leads into the O for if so, is ongoing consent. Ongoing consent is exactly what it sounds like. You always have the right to change your mind, period. If the other person gets mad, that is on them. And I know that that's scary, and that could affect your situation. If you feel like your safety is involved at stake, like, totally understand. But for your mental stability, know that you were not wrong for at least trying to express your feelings about going forward. So that one's also tough because, you know, once you're already in the moment, a lot of people think that's the green light for everything. And then it's hard to pull back. And then a lot of that leads to violence. So just be really careful, but know that you're not incorrect if you decide to change your mind. Don't ever let somebody, no matter what manipulation tactics they use, make you think that you were wrong because you wanted to stop something you weren't feeling anymore. And then the E is enthusiastic consent. That's the, everyone's happy, we're both mutual about it, and we're going for it, and that's it. We're having a good time. E is what your enthusiastic consent is the goal for every kind of interaction like that. So if so, is there consent? If so, it's a go. If not, just remember the facts. Remember your anchors. Remember that you are absolutely allowed to change your mind. You're absolutely allowed to consent to one thing, not the other. You're absolutely allowed to be upset if somebody doesn't inform you of everything that you should know as it relates to that interaction. Before we move on, did anybody who's here have any questions about if so? Any comments or concerns? All right, so that kind of changed how I went forward with things. Oh, what's up, Delilah?
As for freely given consent, you know, like, how can people, I guess, like, you know, what do you do when you're in a situation where you feel like that kind of fear, you know, and especially I think there's also like a physical fear.
Oh, yeah.
If your partner is like, you know, bigger than you, or like, you know, you don't really know that person, you're afraid you're like in some like very physical danger. What do you think is the best way to not consent to something that could ruin your life or be assault, but also not hurt yourself?
Right, I wish I had like a definitive answer. The question, by the way, for anyone who didn't hear was, what do you do when your freely given consent is being pushed and the other person is scary or physically bigger than you, or they get angry, which is always like the scary situation. All I can say is do what's best for you in that situation. Get out alive, and then when it's time to, you know, go over what happened, a lot of the times what stops people from reporting it or stops people from even seeking therapy or talking about it or even accepting that it was rape in the first place is because they got gaslit because the abuser told them, oh, but you said yes, or oh, but you went through with it. So you don't go forward with any kind of justice or getting any kind of help. So I can't say what you should do or shouldn't do in the moment because so many like literal lives are at stake, you know what I mean? And I just want everybody to trust their own intuition in those situations. Like, you will know what you will have to do if it gets to that point, and you just, you know, have to make a choice either way. I mean, I want to say like, just like punch them, you know, like just like kick them or something. But I also don't want people to die. And that's, you already know, that's already what happens, you know, a lot of times. So, but if you feel like you can take them down, go for it. You know? Like, I'm a big fan of the Visine in the water. Just drop an eye drop in their drink and they'll get diarrhea. But I'm not supposed to suggest that because you technically can kill somebody doing that. You're only supposed to do one drop, but I mean, like, just gonna throw it out there objectively as a thing that a lot of, in Vegas where prostitution's legal, it's still violent though. There's a group of women who do that to protect themselves if they feel threatened. I think it's an okay idea, but legally I'm not suggesting that people do that. I'm just saying that people have done that before. But yeah, I mean, the real answer is just trust your instincts and your intuition. If you feel like you could be killed And that's not being dramatic or extreme. That is the consequence a lot of the time. So if you feel like you could be killed, listen to your brain in that moment when you're in survival mode. But then afterwards, do not write it off as, oh, it actually wasn't that bad, or oh, maybe they were right, I was overreacting. None of that. You're absolutely valid if this happens to you, and there's support networks that can help you get through anything. So just trust yourself the whole way through. That's the best answer I can give. I know I wish I could give more. But that was a great question, though. Was there any other questions? What's up?
Oh, yeah, just to jump off of what you just said, I feel like a lot of these people tend to think of them in terms of like one-night stands or like friends with benefit situations, but like a lot of these can happen like when you're in a relationship with someone. Like, I feel like a lot of people think that just because they have a romantic partner, that's like a green card all the time to just do whatever you want. And that manipulation like really comes into play because it's like, oh, well, we're together, and if you loved me, you would say yes.
Exactly, yes.
You know? Or why are we even together if you're not going to say yes, sort of thing. So I think it's important to, it's also with a long-term romantic partner as well. Not
Yes.
just someone who meets you in a bar or something.
And you know what? That is usually, most of the cases are from people you already know or people who you've already had relationships with, and they don't respect specific consent. You know what I mean? You said yes to one thing, but not everything. Now they're mad at you. Oh, we've been dating for this long, or oh, we're married even, you know? Same with ongoing. Like if you decide to stop one night, oh, what is it with you? Like, you know, I mean, if it's your partner, y'all, I don't know. I'm not telling you who to date or who to see, but there's definitely things you should talk about. But now you have the words to use to talk about it. You know what I mean? Because not everybody has a consent breakdown, so they can't exactly express. And that's important too, because maybe your partner isn't a monster. Maybe they're not trying to make you uncomfortable, but communication is key. So if you don't have the words, maybe they're not picking up the hints, so they don't get it either. But once you have the words and then you bring it up to them, if things still don't change, like that's a red flag. You should probably get some more help. But that was a really good point too. What's up, Satya?
Yeah, something that I really appreciate about this is that it's not just applicable to like read the page and then like check to see if others around you are violating or not violating this consent as applies to like one's own self and individual. But it's also really important to take this and use it as a filter for our own behavior.
Yes,
Because
that part, yes.
No one in this room and no one on the Zoom is immune or like is fully inoculated from from behaving in ways that are in fact like violations of consent.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it can be extreme and sometimes not so much. But it is really important that we have this so that we can, like as a community, all be aware, and that when someone helps us check our own behavior, that we put our behavior like through this filter to understand what harms our partners and our community, and so that we ourselves refrain from it.
Absolutely. That's such a good point too. I mean, like it's called rape culture for a reason. It's around all of us. So like, that's a great point. You know, like it is good for accountability for yourself and then the groups that you hang out with. And maybe your homie doesn't know about If So, but you just learned about it and you kind of are sensing something's a little off there, and you might pull them aside and be like, hey, you know, their body language is saying kind of a thing. Maybe they're not really feeling it. Maybe you should talk to them first or something. You know what I mean? It's just something to make you, it's an anchor. It's something to make you stop and really think about the situation, because we live in a really go situation. Everything is instant gratification. I mean, you get your food handed to you in a drive-thru, and then you get angry when it's not in 2 seconds. You get on the internet quick, everything's fast. But like, the point of the anchor is to stop. It's like when we stop and we like really just try to remember the facts and try to replay the things that happen, or if we can't remember every like detail that happened, which is hard all the time, it's like remembering how you felt and not just dismissing that. Because a lot of times when we feel uncomfortable, we don't ever want to feel that again. So we don't allow ourselves to. So we just kind of like hide it or kick it aside or try to throw it away. And then that stops us from getting help. And it stops us from living our freest lives, honestly, because that that can really hold you down. But yep, this is a great point, Satya. Of course, you want to bring it back to the community, which I love. Was there any other comments or questions? Because we can get back to it also, but that's great. Okay, so y'all knew I was going to bring capitalism into this. So, capitalism and gender. And there's a Frederick Engels quote on here. It just says, the modern individual family is founded on the open or concealed slavery of the wife. Within the family, he's the bourgeois and his wife represents the proletariat. So before I even move on, what do we think that that even means? Like, or when we heard that quote, what came to our mind? Delilah?
So I love that. I love Engels so much.
Me too.
But I really love that quote because basically the first part is saying basically that the wife and the modern family is founded upon the wife being the wife being the slave, meaning the literal property of a husband. She's an object. She's an item. She's something that he can use and position for his own personal use. And then so.
I'm so sorry. There's someone in the Zoom that's like doing something weird.
I'm sorry. I thought you
No,
you unmuted him.
Okay, no, I gotta, okay, how do I remove, okay, there you go, send, okay, they left. I'm so sorry. I didn't even realize that someone was doing some sketchy stuff. I'm so sorry, y'all.
The cat in the hat.
I had no idea what was going on. Did we just get Zoom bombed?
I think we made someone a little bit mad. Okay, that's fine. Yeah. Maybe that's a red flag.
I'm gonna make you the host again.
Oh, something tells me it's not for them. Something tells me they're not going to read that one.
Okay, sorry, please go back, we're good.
Oh, go ahead.
But basically, as I was saying, the modern individual family is founded on the open or concealed slave of the wife. She's the literal property of the husband, meaning that she can be, except for like the proposition of being literally sold, like, in chattel slavery, is basically used as a property and object for the husband's own success and acquisition. Any disobedience, any kind of like autonomous will is sublimated to what he's feeling. When it says within the family, he's the bourgeois and his wife are the proletariat, I don't think he's trying to like point to the class conditions, but to point to the fact that human psychic reality doesn't always like reflect what's actually happening. So though in reality, the husband and the wife's position are far more alike to each other than any rich elites in the society, within their family, within the psychic reality and structure created, it creates a hierarchy that makes capitalism perpetuate itself. Because he gets to be the one in power, while she has no power.
Ooh, you know I like, yes, okay, girl. And also that leads into my next slide, so we'll save that, but go ahead.
I think even going into like the economics of it is that like, especially like wives and like mothers especially are expected to do like so much unpaid labor, both physically and like emotionally. They're expected to just do it no matter what position the husband is in. Even if husband is out of a job, even if he's working 24/7, the woman is always expected to basically keep the home in shape so that he doesn't have to.
Yes.
So it's that same like exploitation of labor for his benefit. Because it's not like she is benefiting from her own labor as she should be, but it's for him.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
She is the worker in the home for the husband to then come and not have to do anything.
I like
so
this group.
Like exploitation.
Y'all read Engels already, I'm assuming?
Yeah.
I'm about to say, I was like, because people who don't read Engels are like not that sharp to these answers. So I was like, yes. But yeah, that is essentially the whole idea, is that the way that capitalism is set up is that capitalists want to exploit workers from sunrise to sunset, from 9 to 5, which we all know is way long. It's actually 8 to whenever they decide you can go home. But we're humans. We have to eat. We have to do our laundry. If we have kids, we got to watch them. So how's a worker going to stay out working, making profit for a capitalist all day when they have all these things they got to take care of at home? Get yourself a wife. Yeah, get a wife. Start a little nuclear family, because that's the way to do it, because that's what keeps capitalism thriving. So reproductive labor, is that what we already touched on, that labor that happens in the home. So your laundry, kids, all that, you're not getting paid to do it, but it is work that has to be done so that you can go on and do productive labor for a capitalist to make profit.
At the meeting, there was just like crazy stuff going on.
Yeah.
Is that what we already
so sorry.
It's okay.
What was happening?
We just got super Zoom bombs. Very bad. A lot of people. Okay. Yeah. Let me go back.
It's all good. We're just in our world anyways. We're in Angel's world. Like,
Yeah, we're still
whatever.
Okay, if you want to talk about angles, this is the group to do it.
Yeah.
I see that.
Here, do you want to just put it here and we can pass it out? Here, man.
So that printing is awful. It upsets me because that's actually my artwork and it looks like shit. But
Oh, yeah.
so that's fine.
I get it.
It still looks really great.
Thank you. That's why we like Delilah. That's why it's your birthday all month.
Yeah, I'm just gonna send another link. Just.
Wait, all of this is your artwork?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that's really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Honey,
just
could you
know-
pass this to Regina so Satya and the others together? Thank you so much. Oh, whoops, I forgot to grab it.
Here you go.
Thank you.
Yeah, you know,
Great so far. I love
Thanks, y'all. I'm having a great time talking about it. I just like groups that are receptive to it. Even like in organizing spaces, I feel like everyone's like, well, we're not rapists, so it's fine. I'm like, okay. I was like, okay, it's the exact point of all this, but it's fine.
It's fine. Oh, you can add Taylor. You can add her. You can don't add Tyler.
Can we set it so that people have to be muted?
I'm gonna leave some extra if-sos over here.
I can hear it. I don't know what it was, but I could hear it there. That's good.
We've gotten so much smoke in the past like few days just
Yeah,
because.
because of Ukraine and all of this stuff.
Okay.
These are all things that are like, that are
Oh, okay, so we're still live.
People are misogynistic. People are warhawks.
People are evil. They don't care that it's good.
So y'all, we're still live on YouTube, so
Okay.
just
Instagram.
on
Well,
Instagram.
the Instagram was not working.
So yeah, so people are still live. We're having some misogynist difficulties. We have some sexists who are trying to infiltrate.
I just it really is telling of who you are as a person if you see an event about dismantling rape culture and you're like, let me fuck with this one.
Oh yeah, no.
Like,
Alright, so I was gonna click the link and tell them to. Okay, I see.
Yeah, we used to have when Coalition for Consent, and we started off with the Brock Turner stuff. And we would have this one kid would come to every single event. And for his sign always said the same thing. He was like, talk about Sharia law. I was like, no, I'm not talking about that.
Sorry,
Oh, no.
y'all, you can continue. I just wanted to view it on YouTube.
All right, sounds good. So, picking up on capitalism and gender. So, we're talking about Engels, Friedrich Engels, and Marx to an extent. Talking about reproductive labor, the labor that has to get done inside the home, laundry, dishes, kids, all of that. You do not get paid for it. But by having somebody in the home to do all of that work for free, the male can go get exploited by capitalists and make productive labor by producing whatever kind of profit that capitalists can mooch off of. So now all of a sudden we have a bunch of work areas who can go out of the home and work from sunrise to sunset because somebody packed them a lunch. Somebody's doing the dishes at home. Someone's watching the kids at home. It's interesting how it turned into the women to be the ones to stay at home, but we can also go into that. But there's gendered spheres that happen. And without these gender spheres, capitalism will fall apart. That's how fragile that system actually is when you think about it. Like capitalism, we all know in this room, but for folks watching, capitalism is a behemoth. And the idea of a behemoth is that it eats and eats and eats and eats and eats, and then it just explodes. It's just a temporary system. Capitalism has an end in sight. We're pretty much living in the decline right now. Like we can't even afford places to live, so we understand capitalism is not a forever system. But for the behemoth to keep being satiated, it has to keep having workers that are going to work from 8 in the morning to whatever time at night before they can pass out from starvation, basically. So threats to this structure include working women and LGBTQ+ families. because they don't fit that structure. And that angers capitalists. If you're in a gay relationship, who's the girl, who's the boy, who's doing the job, who's staying home and watching the kids? We can't decide. It's a problem. We don't like it. It scares us and it threatens our capitalism. Working women, that's a huge threat to capitalism. How are you going to work and also take care of your kids? We can't make you, we need you to fit this nuclear family mold. So that's why you see a lot of push for the nuclear family. But before capitalism, women had a lot of jobs that were respected, that were considered women's jobs. I found out that beer brewers was like a woman's job. Yeah, I don't know if y'all have ever seen, it's kind of like the woman at like the old timey like, like pub or whatever. It's like, that was like actually a woman's job, it was considered, and it was really respected. Midwives were another one, because doctors, that wasn't their specialty. Like doctors, if you broke a bone or something or were sick, you would go to a doctor, but a midwife was specifically a midwife. That got kind of phased out during the rise of capitalism. Candlestick makers, it's not a huge deal now, but when you didn't have electricity, that was a big deal. That was a woman's job. So a lot of these jobs changed drastically. And so you weren't seeing women directly contributing to your society anymore the way you used to. So then it became easier to disrespect them over time, to just say, oh, they're not doing any labor for our community. They're not helping us thrive. They're not helping us go for like further and faster. If you hide people in the home all day and you don't see them, you take their work for granted, kind of. And then it just becomes a men's playground where they can just talk politics and talk whatever they want, important work, all day, and kind of leave women's voices out of it. But the Black Panther Party, actually in the second wave of feminism, are a good example of what I wish every feminist was demanding right now. But in second wave feminism, like in the early 70s, you had a true united front. So you had white women in the courts with Roe v. Wade and all that. So you had a young Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and you had National Organization of Women, a lot of these groups that we know today still. They were doing that. You had the Black Panthers who were fighting for socialized reproductive labor. So meaning it is a government service now that everyone has childcare that the government provides you. There's laundry services that the government provides society. There's, all kinds of things that your government provides to you so that women could go out and work, so that there wasn't these strong gender roles. The interesting thing about that is, the CIA dismantled the Black Panthers, so we'll start there. Yeah. And then it goes back to why we always say it's really important to have a multinational front, but have oppressed voices in the front of that front. Because once the Black Panther women started fading off, the demand shifted in third wave feminism. So it went from, yes, socialized reproductive labor, help us out, to, well, we're white women, we have a little more money, we just pay Latina women to take care of our kids. We have immigrant labor for that, so we don't need that. Let's be boss babes instead. Let's fight for that CEO spot, to have more female CEOs, have more female bankers, female corporate leaders. And yeah, that's winning for feminism, I guess. So I just always think that that's an interesting shift in history as far as like this fight goes specifically. But yeah, that's essentially what Engels somehow predicted back in like the 1800s would happen if they didn't stay united around the question of capitalism in this movement. There's plenty of things. There's plenty of issues individually that we all fight for, but absent of the class question, you're not really going to get your actual solutions. You're just going to keep getting, little scraps of differences, but the machine that is capitalism is just going to keep on chugging along. That's why you have Bank of America sponsoring pride events now. They don't care anymore. It's like, sure, be gay, that's fine, just as long as one of you is coming to work every day. We do not care. So that's also why in the fight for gay liberation, there was you know, marriage equality, which I think we can all agree, yeah, it's something we should get. But that was never the main demand of, like, I was called the queer sector of the LGBT fight. It was jobs. It was like, hey, stop killing us and also give us jobs so we can live, and also, like, you know, stop discriminating against us, stop hate criming us. But then you had, you know, wealthier, cis, white, gay couples that were just happy enough with the marriage equality. And a lot of the queer fighters would say, you know, it's not about being a perfect nuclear family that continues to perpetuate capitalism. It's so much more than that. We don't want to be like that. So yeah, you know, it's good to have that equality because we all know the legal reasons of having it. Like, so that's fine, but the fight doesn't end there. In fact, that's like not even one of the main demands, like when you really get into it. So that was just that. So the next topic is toxic masculinity and misogyny in our boys who grow up to be men, that we just keep seeming to let them get away with little things till they turn into bigger things. And then they're men now, so it's not our responsibility anymore to make sure that they know right from wrong. But it was when they were boys, so what happened, right? So I don't know who this quote is by, but I heard it as a kid. Not a kid, I was like a teenager. Heard it as a teenager. And it was, boys are raised to be whatever they want to be. Girls are raised to be desired by boys. And I just like always stuck with me. I wish I knew who said that, but I don't. But like, it's kind of true in a toxic society. Like, and there's two edges to that sword. Men are told that they can be anything they want to be, which is a lie. Like, you absolutely cannot be anything you want to be because there's so many obstacles, there's so many class barriers that every kid cannot grow up to be what they want. So boys are in for a rude awakening. And then girls, on the other hand, are already raised to be little homemakers. You have your little dolls you have to take care of. You have your little, I mean, I liked my kitchen set. I don't even cook now, but I just liked it because I saw adults doing it. But like, at the same time, like, what if my brother liked that though, and he never got it? You know what I'm saying? Like, we already start, like, even just having the kids covered in pink. Pink's one of my favorite colors, but like, why is it girl? Like, you know, it's like, why is pink girl? Like, what started there? But it starts there, and then next thing you know, they're looking back and saying, hey, how come I got a Barbie and my brother got a Nintendo 64 when I was a kid? Like, why are video games boys things when they're like objectively more fun than dolls? But, you know, so it's going to be a little awkward for people watching, but I am going to have to read off here. So there's been studies of different parents, and when they were asked how they feel raising their boys and raising their girls, a lot of the parents admitted that they were afraid to tell their boys no and limit their boys more than they were their girls. Why do you think that is? Does anyone have any idea? Because I thought that was an Australian study done. And they said, I forget the percentage because I don't have it on that slide, but more of the women that they said they were more afraid to tell their boys no to things or to discipline their boys. Why do we think that is? Any idea, Regina?
Patriarchy is bad.
I mean, yeah, straight up.
I don't really know.
What do you think?
I think when the world sees you as a little boy and you like participate in an action that's wrong, you're given kind of, especially when you're white, you're given kind of like this immediate grace, and you're given this understanding that you're not supposed to have as much responsibility to do things as girls. Well, I know, like, 'cause I live in a Haitian family, obviously. I'm a trans woman, you know what I mean? So, like, I was raised to be a male. And, you know, when I was in my family, I remember things like my sister, as soon as like, when she got to a certain age, she had to learn how to cook. She was much more stressed on, like, how to learn these cleaning skills and everything. Because they're trying to replicate the previous ideas they have about how gender is supposed to be instituted and the roles a woman is supposed to play. For a man, it's about working. And so they just have to get you ready to work get you ready to exist and live within capitalism, which is much less of a role that needs to be beat into you in the same way. I also think a lot of fathers like encourage that behavior and like dismiss their wives like complaints or
Ooh, yeah, good point. I didn't think about that one. Yeah. I like that point you made too at the end, is like just dismissing their wives' concerns entirely. So why wouldn't they dismiss the, you know what I mean? Like, why would the girl be any different? But I saw your hand too. And then
So, I'm actually raising my nephew.
oh, ooh, ooh.
So, I feel like, for me at least, he's got a temper.
Ooh.
And I feel like that scares people,
Yeah.
especially women.
Yep. Yeah.
Raising boys.
It does. And that verbatim was one of the things that one of the mothers, when they were asked why they felt that way, it's because I'm afraid when my son throws tantrums. And even though the kid was still small, we can see a boy and know they're going to grow up to be a man. You know what I mean? So it's like we are taught to be submissive to men. We know the strength they're capable of having one day, even if they're small kids right now. So a lot of women fell into that. They're like, ooh, it's actually kind of scary. I don't want to push you. And go ahead. Then we'll get to talk to you.
I was thinking, like, based off what Delilah said when she said, like, whipped into shape, that in, like, cultures where raising boys with such strong gender roles and, you know, uplifting, like, patriarchal standards, it's just not right, probably, to make saying no to boys and in some way making them like feel emasculated from a young age.
Yes.
Because that makes them like weaker.
Yes.
While we don't
Yes.
really care about whipping women into shape based,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I would like that expression because they are raised and you know, socialized to be less than submissive and shit. So.
No, excellent point. Yeah, that's a huge part of it too. And also, you know, women are taught to accept criticisms and discontent with grace and poise. Men are taught to fight when you disagree with them. So why wouldn't they fight their own moms in some cases? You know what I mean? They do, and dad will root it on. Boys will be boys, am I right? You know? I saw another hand over here. Satya.
Cycles definitely perpetuate, and like for women and people that are perceived as women, like around like men, like personal safety is often a function of skills at appeasement. And when one is like caring for and raising a young person who believes to be a boy, believes will grow up to be a man, those appeasement survival skill sets kick in.
Yes, 100%.
Even though you could totally take this 3-foot tall being.
I have to remind my sister-in-law all the time, I'm like, the baby's smaller than you. You're bigger and stronger. Like, you should not be getting beat up by a little baby. Like,
And I'm going to try to be quick, but the thing that this denies boys and men is the opportunity to get resilient in the face of no, to practice resilience in the face of criticism, to have any like imposed moment of self-reflection not be equated with castration.
yeah, no, that's like
terribly important to provide those like practicing, accepting those frustrating moments.
That's absolutely correct.
That it's so important to not rob boys up.
We do rob boys. We set them up for failure is exactly the point. So 1 in 6 reported sexual assault cases are boys. And that's just the boys who will report it. Because remember, a lot of egos at stake with boys here because of these gender roles. So for boys to be vulnerable and to admit that something like that's happening, they don't really have a sense of empowerment or reason to do so. They feel emasculated and maybe they'll get angry, maybe they'll lash out instead, or maybe they'll perpetuate the behavior that happened to them. Maybe that's the example of what being a man is, you know? So there's a lot of things with our boys that we just overlook and mask it with boys will be boys. Like, look at my little boy being a little rowdy tiger. But a lot of these boys are like actually hurting. It actually hurts children to not give them structure. They're actually very stressed out. So when they throw these crazy tantrums, kids will throw tantrums. So let's rewind it. When they throw crazy tantrums or their veins popping out of their neck and they're screaming, F you, mom, I hate you. That's not normal. That's a lack of structure. And that kids actually, what they're saying is they're begging you, please give me answers, please give me guidance, please give me boundaries, please tell me what to do. You'll see a lot of parents with boys especially, Billy, what do you want to do? What do you want for dinner? What do you want to play? What do you? And they're like, you tell me. I just got here. You've been here for years. Like, I don't know what's going on. Like, tell me. And then they get older and they associate mom now with stress because mom never had answers or structure or guidance for them. So the kid had to try to figure it out himself the whole time. And they'll usually fail because for some reason our instinct is do it the wrong way first and then learn the hard way. So now mom comes, what's going on today? Get away! You don't know anything. But that's a deeper thing. It's because mom never gave structure or mom was scared of dad, maybe. Yeah. You know, like whatever it is, that stuck with Billy. So now he's a really pissed off teenager who might take it out on the girls that he meets in high school. I actually think we hit on all of these, but I'll just go through them quick. So gendered society, favoring one gender or the other means more pressure to perform, unrealistic standards. That was definitely said over here a few times, which hurts when you fall from that high. It hurts when you fall and you're not taught that it's okay, you can fall. So you hear, grow up, be a man, man up. It's like, that's just like not a solution to a kid who's going through a crisis or going through a problem. That is not advice. That's just nothingness, really. That means nothing. What you're supposed to say is like, here, let's go over, or here, how can we help guide you? You know, like not just man up, that means nothing. It puts stress, like I was just saying, between the parents and their sons. It makes it harder for them to connect so that by the time they get older, they're just like, done with you. Violence and aggression is encouraged in boys. It's considered a go-getter attitude. A leader attitude, you know, don't take no shit from nobody. Like, but actually it just leads to boys having run-ins with the law a lot easier, boys doing mistakes that they can't just turn around and fix, driving fast cars and crashing them and getting seriously hurt. These are things that look cool in movies and they think, or video games, and they think they can do it, and there's no going back from that. They grow up fearing empathy and admiring conquest. And that's a big thing, is empathy seen as weakness just because of gender roles. It's a lack of unity and a hyper-competitive mindset. So that goes back to capitalism. Capitalism is extremely individualist. It's all about me getting mine. If you're homeless, that's not my problem, I'm gonna walk over you. Like, get a job, you know? And boys are really drilled with that. You can be part of a team, but who wants to be the star player? Everybody. You know, it's difficult. And then it just becomes easier to blame women for men's shortcomings, you know, because men aren't told that it's their fault. So who's left to blame? If only my wife was more supportive, then I would have got that promotion. What's that, Delilah?
It's like how men will always be like, oh, women have such insane standards. They don't want broke men. They'll never help you when you're in any trouble. They want you to be strong. You know, they want you to be invincible and everything. But then it's like, you know, maybe it's just that you're legitimately so awful.
Yeah. Maybe take a shower. Maybe use some body gel. You know, like do something with your life. Maybe get off the Xbox a little bit. Get a PlayStation. No one uses Xbox. Oh, speaking of it's a video game reference. So Man the Hunter and the narrative of male exceptionalism. So I'm an anthropology major, so I heard about Man the Hunter all day. Man the Hunter, Man the Hunter. What are the men doing in society? Literally nothing. Like a lot of societies, the men weren't doing anything. They would catch a little rabbit every once in a while, and then they would go on these big bro hunting groups. But it was kind of cool. They would go on like these retreats with the younger boys and just like mostly do talking, and then they'll get one thing and bring it back like, yeah, we did it. But the whole time, the women are gathering, which sustained them, which kept them alive. Like without gathering, we would have died as humans. We would not even be here because meat was such a rare thing. Because men were just out kind of having a bro time, which is fine. They're having a good time, I guess. But the quote is, it's Mario's world and we're all just living in it. And it was probably Peach who said that. I don't know if she said it, but I'm assuming she thought it at some point. So, like I was saying, hunting is only a small percentage of their diet. Societies lived almost entirely off gathering alone. But man the hunter dominates academia. In academia, there is academic favoritism towards men, even in our early societies when they weren't doing shit. But it's because a lot of the people that were studying these societies were men, and they wanted to feel exceptional. So they kind of, embellished it a little bit. They made it seem like we were fighting like saber-toothed tigers and shit. Like, what I mean? It's just not what they were doing. They set up a few traps, caught some rabbits and squirrels every once in a while, and then went on these big bro trips and came back with big game, once a month, which is fine. It got really gendered though when we turned to agrarian societies and we had to stay in one place. And hunting wasn't as big of a thing where they would have these big bands where they would go off. So they're like, okay, we're chilling here more. Now we can farm, so we have plenty of food. Well, what do we do? What do we do with our spare time? So they kind of started messing around with the idea of politics. They kind of started messing around with the idea of, well, if you have this farm, maybe that's your property now. So maybe we should make like a boundary around it so that your neighbor doesn't think that your crops are his crops. And then they just started splitting like that. So. All right, we're going right through this, y'all. Sorry, it's been a minute, but there's so the idea of male dominance in reality and in fantasy. So man the hero, woman the damsel. So moving up the timeline, all of a sudden women pretty much went from being the ones sustaining the entire society to being damsels in distress for men to rescue from other men? I don't know. I don't know where they're rescuing us from. But I'm a huge sci-fi fan. Every sci-fi fantasy until recently, there's always been at least one, if not the main one like subplot of a man saving a woman from something. Like even in Game of Thrones, like especially in Game of Thrones actually. I read the first book and it's different. Daenerys' story is different. Like HBO decided to go a whole dark way with it, and it's less powerful, and I don't know why they did that. They made her very much a damsel in distress a lot of the time until she wasn't, but anyway. But yeah, they're treated generally with, hold on one second. I'll just skip to the point. Like the reason why this is important though, like I know that sci-fi and video games and everything, it's like all fake, but kids look to that stuff and it's real to them and they grow up with it and they connect with it. So if you're growing up and you're seeing things and you can't connect with any of the characters, or the only character that's a girl is in distress all the time, or there's no trans characters at all, or if they are, they're just like in the background like, yeah, I'm here, but I don't have any personality or lines or plot at all, but I'm here, like it's really not enough. It can't just be, some man adventuring and everybody else is part of his world. Like we have enough of those stories. Also on that last point though, real quick, is anyone here a Star Trek fan?
Yeah.
All right, I see y'all. Did you all hear about the fight that the women had? Not in the original series, but actually the Next Generation, which was way more progressive. Yes, that behind the scenes. So the women were being threatened in so many ways. Even just getting female merch, like women's cut tees of Star Trek was like a fight. So Deanna Troi, she always had the low cut thing. And and it was like real tight, which is how I like to dress. But like she was just like, hey, can I get like a Starfleet uniform? Like everybody else maybe, like I'm in pajamas all the time. It's cool sometimes, but like they basically threatened her. And then also she has like a strange accent. And when I didn't have internet, I never knew what it was. And then I finally looked it up when I got older, and she's just making up an accent because they said, well, Picard, Patrick Stewart, already is British. So we don't want two British accents on the ship's bridge, which is dumb because they totally could have, but I think they were just mad at her because she asked for a uniform. So they made her start reading. They're like, come up with she's from Betazoid. They're like, come up with a Betazed accent. She's like, what does that mean? And they're like, I don't know, figure it out or you're fired. So that's why she talks kind of funny. the whole way, all 7 seasons. Then they finally do give her a uniform, season 7 at the end.
I remember this episode.
Oh, it's so humiliating. Yeah, where that new captain comes in, Picard's doing some special ops stuff, I don't know where he's at, but this new guy comes in and he looks at her, looks her up and down, does, get her, he's like, that's not regulation Starfleet uniform, get her dressed. And they give her a uniform, and that's how she gets it. They kill Tasha Yar after season 1, and because she was the ringleader of the women. They got rid of Crusher, the doctor, for season 3. They brought in that other doctor. And yeah, they just like humiliated Troy. Then that was the new progressive Star Trek. So just interesting. So, which comes to the last point. How do we fight back? So, remember the facts, remember the resources, remember your worth. We can help educate, but not debate. This is not really debatable stuff. Not really debating anybody on our like freedom to exist and not be attacked. Right. But we can definitely educate people. So like holding events like this is one of the starts. Yes. So we can prepare, but we can't prevent. And that's the big thing is everyone wants to always talk prevention, except for when it's like social issues, like preventing a housing crisis. That's not when we want to talk prevention. We only want to talk prevention after someone gets attacked. And then they say, oh, don't wear this, or you shouldn't have done that, or shoulda, coulda, woulda, whatever. That's just ridiculous. Like, the only way we can stop this is if predators stop attacking us. Like, and since we can't prevent them from doing that, all we can do is prepare ourselves. So, if so, is to prepare everybody here to prepare themselves for a situation as it's happening. You know, just remembering all of your resources that are available, remembering that you are not alone, ever. This is something that is way more common than gets reported. And you can kind of just arm yourself with a little more confidence and knowledge the more you dive into it and you say, you know, this is actually common, unfortunately, but we can prepare. Become comfortable with setting boundaries. It's really hard to do that. I mean, I love saying no, especially to men. It's like one of my favorite things. But it's scary a lot of times. You know what I'm saying? So like, setting boundaries, though, you can practice that with family and friends, with people you're already comfortable with, and then it becomes less of a challenge because you've already spoken it a few times. You've already said it in practice with someone you trust. So, you know, just start there. Start where it's easy. Use your anchors. So if so, remember the facts. Just keep trying to use that stuff. And then be comfortable with that moment of stepping back and getting your mind clear. Be comfortable with stopping this go, 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 fast, fast, fast. This pressure to just go, work, do everything really fast. Like that oftentimes pressures us into doing things that an abuser is trying to get us to do we don't want to do. You know what I mean? It's like be comfortable with just being aware of the pressure and taking a moment to stop so that you can become aware. And then, of course, always trust your intuition. I believe that all of us are like, have a superpower inside of us that says, hey, danger, Will Robinson, don't go forward, like sci-fi. But like, and a lot of the time we just ignore it straight up. We're just like, oh, I'm overreacting, or it's not that bad, I'm crazy, I'm sure it's fine. Or you have somebody being like, no, it's fine, and you know it's not. Listen to yourself. Don't let one of your friends get you into trouble. And then last but not least, build a community that you can lean on. There are a lot of communities that exist, so just join a community. This right here, TCAC, is a community that you can trust and you can lean on. But we're out here, you're not alone. And that's it for me. That's it, if anything. Thank you. But yeah, I guess if there's like comments or questions.
I have a question, or more like a comment.
Mm-hmm.
This workshop is like really important, and this is the second time we've done this. So like, let's have you come over here.
I would love to, yes.
You can agree with that. But I always kind of get something new, and sometimes it's like the same information, but like it helps me just kind of like remember, you know, all the things that you said, and just knowing that like we can't fight against patriarchy. patriarchy. We can't fight against, you know, all these other systems of oppression if we're not arming ourselves.
Yes.
And too often, and I mean that like in a theoretical like way, but like too often I feel like people think that just because you're a socialist, or just because you're an anarchist, or just because you're a leftist, or you're a liberal, or whatever, that means that somehow you just know not to.
You're absolved.
Yeah, you're absolved
Yeah.
of these things. And we know that too often that, like, you know, in any community, these things are going to happen. But because we are socialists, because we are, you know, activists, we know that, like, we can actually change our conditions, and we don't just sit back and be like, well, it's just what it is.
Exactly.
You know? And this workshop has helped me just kind of like remember, like, you know, there are times where even I will feel uncomfortable like saying something because I see something and I'm like, okay, this is a problem. You know, maybe I should say something. I just have like, okay, the Christina Kittle's in the back of my head. Like, okay, I should say something.
Do it. No.
I should say something. That's actually happened before. Like literally, right after this workshop, I went to like a party, and there was like a person that like kept saying to this other person like, oh, like let me kiss you, let me kiss you, let me kiss you, let me kiss you. And then after, and I was just like, no, I was like, you can't, that's not consent, like that's not okay.
No, yeah.
And then the person who was being like victimized then like spoke up and was like, yeah, like that's totally not okay,
Good,
you can't do that. And then other people then also started jumping in.
Yes,
like,
we love it.
Well, at first it took me being like, okay, like, you know, I don't feel comfortable because I don't know this person. It's like, no, like even if it's not my party, it's not my house, even if we weren't friends, it doesn't matter. Like, it's important for me to make sure that I cultivate that space. And so I just want to make sure that like everyone kind of like remembers that. Like, there's a party here later tonight.
Yeah, let's say this is good prep for what?
Practice for that,
Yes.
y'all. Like, don't
Yeah.
dance without consent. Don't force people to take shots. And
Gosh,
I
yeah,
think,
that's
you know,
another
like,
one,
that's
yeah.
and you can apply that not just to
Yep.
you know, dating or like sex, but literally just everything in
Yes.
general. Like, don't touch people without consent. Don't hug without consent. Don't, you know, like, let's have that space. So, like, you know, once again, I just want to thank you again for like having this workshop.
Thank y'all.
It's,
Thank
like,
you,
know, bringing
TCAC.
back like the basics, or it may not seem like the basics, but I think are like kind of like helping us remember like this is why we're having this workshop.
Yes, thank you so much. And Virginia, you're like my hero for that. I didn't know that that happened, but like that's what it's about. That's very brave.
Oh yeah,
Like,
I felt very comfortable. But
oh my gosh, that's so dope. Delilah.
I've loved your work since, you know, in Minneapolis when you talked about punching that transphobic cop in the face.
Ooh, not many people remember that
I
one,
remember.
but I remember.
I also love how you just punched a robber in the face when they tried to grab
I
your
did.
bag and
I
ran.
did. I punched him in the face.
That did happen.
It happened. Thank you.
So I'm just bringing that up to say, like, I just like respect that character, and like more importantly, I think like when I like think about these issues specifically surrounding like, you know, marginalized or dispossessed populations and people who have experienced trauma in the past, this is really essential for especially them to hear.
Yeah.
Because especially if you've been like, you know, if you face sexual abuse or kind of like some kind of real abuse from a younger age, or if you're a person who has been taught that because of your gender identity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you are undesirable or unlovable, that really feeds into like a lot of people's behaviors of like ending up in these situations and cycles of abuse. You know what I mean? Especially if like you're literally treated like trash by other people, which is something that like, you know, a lot of transgender individuals have to face. So I really appreciate this, and I really hope that like, you know, for me, I guess like my question is like, how do we convince people in our own, because like as activists, like we have to understand that we're not pure perfect people.
Yep.
We're just like everyone else. We've just made a dedication to a goal that we need to work towards. So how do we like teach activists who are probably like, well, you know, because people like to play and be like, oh, I know everything about consent, and you know, I'm the perfect person.
Oh yeah, I hear it all the time. Yeah.
How do you get them to understand that this internal culture and like constantly teaching people about this is a part of their work as well in themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. I want to be thoughtful in the answer because that's a great question. I mean, what I usually just do is like, I just try my hardest to kind of get them to understand the different kinds of consent, because I feel like that's where the gray area is, where it's like, oh, well, like you said yes though, so now I'm confused. And like, I like to give people who are in our spheres the benefit of the doubt. Like, you know what I mean? And like, I like to believe that like, if another organizer did something, it's really because they were confused on the communication. It's really because they thought in their brain that they had the green light. And like, a lot of guys are really trained to absolutely ignore signs of like discomfort short of a verbal like no or like a fuck off in some cases, like, you know, like short of that, they're not noticing the like, oh, or like that kind of stuff. So it's like difficult. But to answer your question, if so is my Bible kind of like, I just try to always like, if I find myself in the situation or if I like notice a comrade doing something, I'll like bring it up and be like, hey man, like, you know, it's like really interesting. Planned Parenthood like put out these different kinds of consent, and it's like stuff you don't really normally think about, but like, for example, freely given consent, like try to ask yourself if like they were really felt safe or if it was a situation, and usually they're receptive. If they're not, you know, can't force them to be, but like, I think that speaks to, you know, IPSO speaks to all kinds of people, and it helps them usually when they have it written out for them. And like, we're not assuming that they're awful people in the first place. Like, it was a great question though, because I'm gonna work on the answer to that for next time. What's up?
I guess I have like a similar like anecdotal thing that Regina brought up, and I also wanted to ask like a question or like a discussion topic. Firstly, like after the workshop you did last year with TCAC, I wasn't as involved in this space. I was just kind of like I was peripherally involved in just getting my foot into it. But like this consent breakdown, I remember it from last year, and it like was so it was just so affirming, and coincidentally and like awfully like after the workshop, I think maybe just like a week later, one of my closest friends told me about like a situation where she had just been completely violated, and it was someone in like an activist space. This was like during the uprising, you know, so like she took that as like, oh, I could trust this person, you know, they have a good head on their shoulders, they wouldn't do anything that would violate me because they're, you know, leftist, liberal, whatever, and they told me about a situation that happened that made them feel really bad, but they felt so embarrassed to tell me because they tried to tell their roommate, and their roommate made them feel bad about it, and just like, maybe you're overreacting, like he's a good guy, he's you know, he protests like good causes,
he's a feminist,
he works with autistic people, so you anyway, it was really messed up, and like what she was describing were feelings that I had felt in the past too, and I wasn't able to put like a label on it without this, like the informed consent part was so major, and like explaining that to her, I was like, this is so insane because I just learned about this, like about consent, and what it really means, as opposed to it being just like yes or no. Yeah. Because by her logic, well, she said yes, so she wasn't violated. She's just upset for no reason, which I've experienced too. Anyway, I know like this is often a conversation where a lot of people who are violated, or you know, or whatever, they don't feel comfortable going to like authority for help, or you know, some sort of justice. And then I was wondering like how we felt about like weighing like call out culture versus what for people who don't feel comfortable like going to the police or something, and then call out culture works, and then where like restorative justice comes into place, where we can maybe help people like reform their ways, and where do you draw the line there?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because that was the exact question that I struggled with when I started Coalition for Consent, because there was a lot of like, oh, you know, this person did this, we should go beat him up, and I can fight, so you know, I considered it. I was like, well, we could do that, but there's a million Brock Turners, there's a million other people that are just going to keep doing this stuff, so I can't beat up everybody, you know what I mean? Like, and it's just like dangerous to try to, but I think it is about trying to educate people and having the confidence and, you know, courage to do it, which is why I'm trying to arm people with the knowledge so that they can build the confidence. Because like you even said, it's like once you had the words, it's like, oh, this is what I'm trying to say. You can start practicing speaking them. And then where I would say to draw the line, though, is if the person's not receptive, if they're still gaslighting you after that. I mean, and here's the thing. I had someone take advantage of me when I was younger. I didn't have any of this. Learned it all. That person reached out to me when I was older and, like, you know, like, thought we were still cool and stuff. And then I finally was like, actually, you know what? Like, you know, that time, you know what I'm talking about? Like, that wasn't cool. That affected me. Like, I finally learned, like, in which ways it violated me. And I'm not going to, you know, assume that you're a bad person, but I want you to understand this so that moving forward, you don't do it again. And, like, I'm assuming that it affected him because his response was just, actually, you're right, I'm so sorry. And then he respected my boundaries. I never heard from him again. But I didn't, like, go out of the way to, like, do, like, a cancel campaign because that's, like, kind of painful for the person, too. It's, like, not really, you don't really get to heal when you, because then it's, like, what happens, you know, you call a person out, you get people angry at them, they call them out, you know, this or that, but only 5 out of 1,000 see any jail time, you know. Most of the time they just continue to walk free, and then you start resenting your friends a little bit for some reason. Then you start resenting any business that they went to, you know, then you start canceling everything by proxy because they existed in that space, and you shouldn't be canceling things in your life because somebody else fucked up. Like, in the end, you start actually like isolating yourself from your community, and you get suspicious of everybody. You start to think that they're all against you, and that's a symptom of being abused, though. Like, that heightened paranoia, that, like, oh, you're with him if you're not with me kind of thing. That's actually fear. That's actually just because you're afraid because you were attacked, and you were violently attacked, and, you know, you felt helpless, so now you're afraid. What's that?
I was just thinking, like, to touch on what you were saying about, like, the restorative justice aspect.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the same conversation comes up when we talk about people who commit other crimes as well. Like, when we talk about killer cops, when we talk about, like, serial abusers, people kind of, like, in the adventurous, like, ultra left are like, oh, like, we shouldn't put abusers and killer cops in jail because that's just perpetuating the carceral structure of our society and whatever, blah, blah, blah. I think before we get into what can we do to help these people who are serial abusers, who are hurting people, we need to dismantle the system that lets them do that in the first place.
Ooh, yes.
So, like, just because you stop one person from abusing other people doesn't mean that you fix the solution.
Exactly,
or you
yes.
fix the problem and offer a viable and robust solution. The reason men abuse women and the people around them is because of patriarchy, because they're the ones in power and they get away with it because they're in power. So when we remove that power structure, then we're going to see a huge shift, and that's when we're going to actually be able to address these things long term, I think.
Absolutely.
So,
you were perfectly, that was it.
Trying to address it now is just on such an individual scale.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, maybe it's a good thing to try and help those people, like maybe they were abused as a child. Like, we don't know the situation for every abuser, but it's just not sustainable. And that's why we need, like, we need to dismantle the system we live in now.
Exactly. It's like rape culture. Like, the fact that is a thing is the problem. Like, there's a million Brock Turners. Like, they're just going to respawn when you think you got rid of one if we don't get to the root of it. But also just, like, building your community, too. So that when it does hit close to home, like, you don't feel alone, or your friends and everybody know where to go. And, like, I think that's a good start. It's like, we can do restorative justice for sure if we feel like, you know, the person isn't actually a monster, and we feel like, you know, it was one off, but they still need to be held accountable, like it happens. But also it's about healing yourself, like, and arming yourself and knowing your worth. And just, like, so many people, myself included, I was kind of on a warpath for a minute. I'm like, oh, you know, that guy was such a monster. He's still out there. But I, like, never healed that whole time because I was so, like, obsessively focused with this idea of justice. And then when I started learning, like, how big the issue actually is, strangely, I was like, oh, I'm never gonna, that's not the path. Like, this is more the right way. So you said it perfectly, though. So your hand up.
So I was wondering what you thought, I guess, the most
most, or the easiest way to deal with missing steps in the communities is
What?
missing steps.
Like the ifs.
What?
What's missing steps? I missed.
Oh, to deal with like the stuff that has to get done, basically? Or what do you mean?
No, like people. Have you not heard that phrase before?
No.
Okay, so a missing step is a phrase for someone that is like a predator in the community. And if someone new joins that community, they don't know about
Yes,
that person, but
I
other
know what
people
you're
do.
talking about.
So if they don't know about that person, they're going to miss that.
Yeah, I got you.
And end up hurting themselves in the process, or getting
Yeah,
hurt
yeah.
in the process.
So, because that was the problem in Jacksonville. We have like a notorious abuser who has like a police record and everything and just keeps paying to get off the hook. I don't know what the deal is with him. And that was one where it became a call-out thing because he owned a bar that was very popular. And a lot of young people go to that bar, like just turned 21, some of them underage, and you'd still give them drinks. So like people were getting drugged there and stuff. So that became a thing. So like that became a public campaign, and it needed to, you know what I mean? But like, I would just say that's when I like made like 1,000 of these and just started like putting them up in every bar. And then I had bars who were reaching out to us saying like, hey, is there a way that like you can do this workshop for our bar and then we can get like a certificate or something, or like a sticker. It's like, this bar is a safe place, and like we went through the training and stuff, and we can like have copies of these. So like that's like like that would be a really effective thing, because that actually ended up getting that person taken off as one of the co-owners of the bar. Yeah, and so I don't clap, he's got 2 other bars now, but like, yeah, but the one bar that was the most popular, the co-owner is a 3-time survivor. And she was like, yeah, you know what, he's got to go. And like, I was too afraid to do anything about that. And like, you know, she was like, as a 3-time survivor, I should have done something. But it's like, it's not about coulda, shoulda, you know what I mean? It's just like, now you are doing something. We have the resources to work together. But like, getting the education and information out any way that you can, as far as you can, and as much reach as you can. If there's like a place where this like known abuser goes a lot, definitely hit that spot as hard as you can. Because like for us, it was easy because it was the bar that we all knew. So I would go to all the Pride events and have like little flyers and just like hand them out of that, just so people just knew. But like, yeah, I would just say just trying to get the info out as far as you can. Work with certain businesses. Some businesses actually want to have this kind of stuff, you know what I mean? Because it like fills their, like sexual harassment's a big deal in like the business world. So like sometimes they're like, yeah, definitely, like that'll make us look good. But like either way, it's getting the word out there. That's a great question though, because we deal with that a lot in Jacksonville. Oh, yeah. Was there another?
Oh, my bad.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, something that that I think is like missing a lot is having designated people to confide in.
Ooh.
Because when something happens and it's like, tell someone, well, I'm looking around, I'm looking at all the name tags,
Yeah,
and
it's
there's
like,
nobody with name someone.
That part.
Whatever.
Yep.
So who is someone? Like, tell someone. Like, someone's no one's name. Like, fill in the blank. So
Yeah.
in your organizing spaces,
Yep.
in your friend groups, in your workplaces, everyone knows, like, even the biggest person in the office knows that if they are violated, there's someone they can go to.
Yep,
Like,
absolutely.
star football players need to know that there's someone to go to if they're violated.
Yep.
Like, janitors need to go, have some place to tell if you experience violations. So like having an obvious and named trustable someone to confide in is the first part of
Absolutely.
all of it. And then that person needs to be like available and have people available to bring in to consult with the victim, so that the victim or whoever has the experience of being violated can, in an informed way, choose how to move forward. And maybe that looks like can you two folks have a conversation with me and the person?
Yeah,
who
a mediation group's good, yes.
There's lots of ways to go forward, but the only way transformation, like the only, like what makes people eligible for transformative, like for transforming their behavior, is getting confronted about it by people who are willing to monitor their efforts of transformation. And that takes a lot of time and effort. And if someone is non-repentant and resistant and acts entitled from the start, you have to isolate them.
Yeah, agreed,
In order to
agreed,
preserve your
agreed.
space. Otherwise, they will make the whole space a cult of their own personality.
It'll be about them, yeah.
And then you
Suddenly
drop
they're the
everybody-
victim.
Everybody else. So it's like you gotta have somebody to confide in, you gotta consult, you gotta confront. If you want to give someone the opportunity to transform, and if it is not safe for your community to give them that transformative opportunity, you must isolate.
Absolutely.
From that space.
No, that's great. And that goes back to building your community, like deciding who it is. Someone in Jacksonville, I'm someone. Like, so like have a someone.
I'm someone in Tallahassee.
Yes. So what?
No, I really do agree with like the approach that like a lot of this can only be stopped through like, you know, preventative measures, because it's like with a lot of things in organizing, you've got to like build the kind of like structures to put in place before you grow or before you have to deal with a lot of these problems. Or else it's gonna kind of sometimes have long-term effects that like will just continue to affect people and will continue to affect like your organization's growth.
Yes.
So I really just like, you know, be proactive, be a little harsh. It's better to err on the side of caution, especially with something like this, even though like obviously like don't be ridiculous. Like if someone gives someone an accidental hug, don't be like, you're banished forever.
Right, yeah.
Like,
How dare you?
you know,
Didn't consent to that, you peasant.
People deserve like some grace, and people are really not taught consent. So like, you know,
Yeah,
making
exactly.
sure people understand the basics and have examples
Exactly.
of that, and can have conversations with people they trust is important. But also like whenever I'm in a space and like, you know, there's some kind of abuser or whatever in the space, you know what I mean, and you know that person's an abuser, if you, especially like in our own activist spaces, like we'll probably have to deal with some people who will keep on coming around who are like, ooh, but what we can do is be you know, just, you know, make relationships with the other people in your org. Don't let them be isolated from you. One criticism that we've had, which I think some
Okay, go. Tell me.
I think there's some truth in the fact that they're like, you're a very tight-knit group, you know what I mean? Sometimes people feel like you can break in. And it's like, yeah, we're besties, but, you know, like, at
It's
the
a
same
process.
time,
We have like a vetting process because we want to feel safe in the work we're doing. It's dangerous work. Like, agree. Because we get that same critique all the time.
that's true,
But it is, yeah.
Everybody, come to the party later.
Yeah, reaching
Gaslight ourselves about that. It is dangerous work.
It's dangerous work.
reaching out to people, kind of like, you know, making a relationship with people, and also just being like, hey, I just met you, yada yada, feeling out their vibe, and then telling them about that person and their status is really important, so they have information to go forward with, if you're really afraid of that person. But otherwise, make them unwelcome in that space as much as you can. Make them know that nobody wants them to be there.
Yeah, we've had to do that to somebody. In 2018, we had an abuser in the group. And it's so weird. It goes back to intuition, man. I said, I don't like that kid. He's weird, but I'm not trying to pick on anybody. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, what am I? I'm like, he's just weird. I just don't like him. A little nerd. I'm like, no, you know what I mean? I'm like, you know, I don't have any reason to not. So I thought, you know, then you start looking at yourself. You're like, what is it in me that makes me uncomfortable around them? No, it was him. Straight up abuser. And he took advantage of one of our youngest members, which to me is like worthy of fighting, like fist fighting over, but like, and put her in a really uncomfortable position. And on top of that, I'm not gonna give any more information because people are watching.
Right.
But anyway, but he was an abuser, and his family's really powerful in the city. So it became like all right, what do we do? And like, you know how it's like, oh, like you'll get the guys who are like, oh, I'll sue you. My parents will sue you. His parents will sue us. So we were like, okay, we got to figure out how to do this to where we don't get sued. So it's like, we don't know you. We don't know your name. We never met you. You're not part of this organization. Don't wear any of our shirts. Don't come to any events. And that'll be that. Because if we do a campaign to smear the person, we will get sued and we will lose. So we can't do any of that. But you cannot have any affiliation with us at all. And I mean, for a little bit, he would try to like on the outskirts things show up. So like he came to like the big protests and stuff and try to like show his face. But then, you know, after all, when he realized we were serious, and even like his bros in the group were serious, like, and that was one, I was someone for the woman that was involved, but we got all our guys to be the ones to have the meeting with him. And, you know, at her behest, you know what I mean? She was like, yeah, like, I'm cool with that. And they were the ones who broke the news, and they were the ones who were like, we're not playing around, like, see ya. And, you know, misogynists oftentimes will only listen to other men. So weird how that works, right? But yeah, but it worked, you know, it was really hard and difficult. And she, you know, was embarrassed. She like, it affected her work, but now she's like one of our strongest organizers. She bounced back, so yeah. She really did. But it was hard for everybody. It was like, oh geez, like it was a lot. But it happens. Like you said, sometimes you just gotta lay those boundaries out there and be for real about them.
Yeah, I think that goes back to like what we were talking about, like if people are receptive, because sometimes people really don't know, and like these like guidelines for consent that you gave us, like these don't have to just be about like romantic context. It could just be like unwanted touching and like conversation topics and just like making someone uncomfortable in any of those ways as well. And sometimes people really don't know that like they're breaching one of these. So like once you bring it to them, they really can only react in two ways. They can either say, oh my God, I'm so sorry, like thank you for letting me know and communicating, or they can be resistant, like Satya was saying, and they can be like, oh, I never did that, or like you're making stuff up or whatever. And I think it like that, reaching out and having that communication in the first place puts the ball out of your court and puts it in theirs. Like they can choose whether to improve themselves and to take the advice and to own it and swallow their pride, or they can choose to become a toxic, like blood-sucking member of the community, and that's the point where you need to be like, okay, we went to you, we had a conversation, you're not receptive, so now like you have a reason to isolate that person, like you're done.
Exactly.
Like, we tried to have the intervention process and it didn't work. And, like we've had to do that before. And it worked really effectively, and we were able to protect some of our community members because we had that conversation in the first place instead of pushing it to the side and just not saying anything for the sake of comfort. It's a form of liberalism.
It is. Mao definitely says it is a form of liberalism. Yep. No, but I mean that. I know y'all already understand this concept, but like you were saying, and Satya, I think you said it, where it's like not just about like sexual experiences or romantic or erotic or whatever. It like forcing people to do like pressuring people to do shots, you know, to drink. That's a huge one, right? Because it's like sometimes they're like, no, do a shot, and then next thing you know, I'm like, oh, I don't want to do a shot. They're not respecting that boundary. Then you're drunk because you did the shot because they kept pushing you to do it.
Or like doing
do this bump, do this line, and then next thing you know, no, just let me kiss you, just let me give you a kiss. Like, so it's meant for boundaries of all kinds, to just like be strong in your boundaries no matter what it is, because like you said, these kinds of consent, freely given especially, you know what I mean, begging somebody is, and they cave in and give in, because that's what happened to me when I was younger, just like begging and begging and begging and begging. I was like, fine, I guess so, but like that's not freely given. If you have to ask somebody 100 times like to get the answer you want, like maybe you're not listening. But I know we've been here like all night, so
It's been super amazing.
I mean,
Depends on how much more live stream time you have.
I feel like it ended probably.
Let's give it up for Christina.
Thank you all so much. I love doing these workshops. Thank you, Regina and TCAC.
Let's practice consent and I hug you.
You know you can.
Thank you so much, Christina. Thank you everybody else for being here. Thank you for the people who are on the live stream. We will be doing this again Monday at 5 p.m. With Students for Democratic Society, because Jeff, for all your live streaming needs, that's the guy. I don't know his information, but I'm sure we can put it somewhere over there. But yeah, thank you all so much. Do you think it's possible to put the presentation on our website or on our Facebook?
I would love to, yeah.
Okay, awesome. And if you want Christina to do this at your respective organization or job or whatever, you can hit her up, and she maybe
it might be virtual depending on how far away you are, but I definitely am open to helping anybody have this information and, you know, anything else. I have a lot of these too, but I only printed 2 copies. But yeah.
Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok at tallycac.com. That's TALLYCAC. And Sunday, No. Monday, I got it right. 5 p.m. HCP with Super Nerd Cracker Side. We'll be having Christina Kittle again. Thank you all so much for your time. We're going to go ahead and end the live stream. Go ahead and share with your friends.
Thank you.